Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, this is just a channel where we do all kinds of stuff. So thanks for stopping by. So right now I'm making chicken pot pie. I'm just sweating some onions in my frying pan, and over in that pot I have some chicken broth. So usually when I make chicken at my house, I will save all the bones and whatever's like left over from a whole chicken, and I'll just put it in my freezer. That way I can have fresh homemade chicken broth, or I can use it for soups or whatever. So I'm just sweating my onions. I'm gonna leave them on a low heat for about 15 to 20 minutes, and I'm gonna let my chicken just sit in that pot and start to break down. And as you guys can see, it's time for me to have some coffee. So the coffee that I use is the Starbucks Pike Place. And I recently switched over to coffee whitener just because it's less calories, and I find that it's easier for like my body to digest. I was having a hard time with dairy products and stuff, so I try to keep them to a minimum just because I find that I have a hard time. So I'm using a reusable coffee pod, and I just find that they're better for the environment, and it's a lot cheaper for me to buy my own Starbucks coffee and use the reusable pods. So as you guys can see, I'm over there slicing up my chicken breasts. They're just a regular family pack of chicken breasts, and they are seasoned with whatever green seasonings were in my cupboard. So probably oregano, parsley, basil, and as you guys can see, Killian thinks that he's gonna cook. There he is again. So I'm just making my coffee, putting my sugar and my coffee whitener in there. I'm obsessed with this coffee, you guys. It's so good. It has like a little hint of chocolate in it. So when you make it, the chocolate all settles to the bottom. Oh, it's so good, you guys. If you're a person that likes really strong coffee, then that's definitely the coffee for you. Okay, so I'm just mixing up my onions, and as you guys can see, they're starting to wilt down, and they're getting a good amount of color on them. So I'm just taking a little bit of that chicken broth and putting it in the pan just to get the flavors off the bottom of the pan and add a little bit of moisture to the pan. Now I'm gonna go right ahead and put about 5 cloves of garlic in my magic bullet. So this is my first time making a chicken pot pie, and it turned out actually pretty good. I was pretty impressed with the way that it turned out, as you guys will see at the end of the video. But I also didn't realize how easy it was to make from scratch. Like, I was thoroughly impressed with how easy this recipe was to make. So I'm just adding there's about 5 cloves of garlic, and the way that I figure out how much garlic to put in a meal is I usually put 1 clove of garlic for each person. So there's 5 people in my family, so I put 5 cloves of garlic into my pot pie filling. So I'm just gonna give it a good stir. Killian's right behind me, taking things out of the cupboard or out of the drawer. I swear he's always like right in front of me whenever I'm trying to do stuff. Okay, so I'm just adding a little bit of flour in there now to make a roux. And that's just gonna coat all of those onions and that garlic and make it so that it mixes well when I add liquids to it. And it's gonna kind of thicken it up a little bit too. So I'm just adding a little bit more flour. So while I'm doing all this filling, I have my pie crusts sitting in the fridge, and I'm just like letting them sit and get chilled. I did make my pie crusts from scratch. You guys don't have to make your pie crusts from scratch. Obviously, you can use a store-bought one if you want. I just happen to have all the ingredients to make my own crust. And if you guys do want to see a crust recipe, please leave it in the comments below and I will upload a video of how to make a pie crust. So it looks like we're gonna start adding the vegetables now. For this recipe, I did onions, garlic, carrots, corn, and peas for the vegetables. So I'm just gonna give these carrots a little chop. And I just have my frying pan on a very low heat just to keep everything warm. I didn't want the carrots to cook through too much because they are gonna go in the oven and I don't want the vegetables to like break down. So I just like left it on a very, very low heat, just enough to keep it warm. And now I'm going to take my chicken broth and I just put that strainer in the top of it so that I could pour it right into my frying pan. That's actually a steaming pot, but it works really well for what I needed it for. And it just makes sure that none of the bones end up inside my filling for my pot pie. So now I'm just adding a little bit of cornstarch in there to thicken up the filling, just to give it a little bit of texture and make it a little bit thicker. And you'll find that you have to add like quite a lot of cornstarch, which is fine. You won't taste it. You won't even notice that it's in there. Okay, so I also just refilled my pot so that I can make some broth for my dog. And now I'm just putting the shredded chicken into my pot pie filling. And I'm also going to add my frozen vegetables at this point. So I added in about a family pack of chicken, so about 5 or 6 chicken breasts. And then I added in about a cup of each kind of vegetable. So I like to make chicken broth for my dog because he really likes chicken broth or any kind of broth. He likes to eat ice cubes made out of it. So I'll break down the chicken broth and then I'll pour it into an ice cube tray and make him a whole bunch of meat broth ice cubes, and he really seems to like that a lot. So now I'm just mixing everything together and giving it a good turn, just to make sure that it all gets incorporated and the peas kind of thaw out a little bit, and the corn and the peas kind of thaw out a little bit, and everything gets mixed in equally, because I mean, you obviously want some corn, some peas, some chicken, and some carrots in every single bite. So I want it to be well mixed up. And as you guys can see, like, that looks amazing. It looks so good. You could almost eat it just like that because it looks so, so good. The cooking time for this is obviously a little bit longer. I would say it took me about 45 minutes to make it. So now I'm just gonna grab some seasonings and put those in. So I'm adding like a few teaspoons of salt. And then I'm gonna add probably about a teaspoon of pepper. And this mixture also has all the seasoning in it that was on top of my chicken, because I did season my chicken before I cooked it. So it also has like oregano, basil, parsley, probably some rosemary. I just used like whatever green seasonings were in my cupboard. That's what I put on the chicken. And that's kind of how I always do it. If I'm like cooking chicken, I usually will go for seasonings that are all the same color. I know that sounds really weird, but that's kind of how I pick my seasonings, and it always works out that the seasonings kind of go together. So I'm just adding a few more spices, and you can pick whatever spices you like, whatever ones work for you. I just added a little bit more of those green spices, so basil, oregano, rosemary, parsley. So as you guys can see, my filling is nice and thick. And that's kind of the consistency that you want, because it's going to help the pie stay together. So now we are going to get our pie crusts ready to fill. So these pie crusts, I made them about 2 hours before I made the filling, and I just set them in the fridge so that they could chill. I'm just poking holes in the bottom of my crusts with a fork so that there's no air bubbles or anything like that, and the heat has good circulation around the inside of the pie. So this piece that I'm rolling out right now is going to be the top of my crust. So I'm just gonna grab some flour and use it to roll my dough out and kind of stop it from sticking to my rolling pin and stop it from like breaking. If you guys are wondering how I made this pie crust, you can leave a comment in the comment section and I will post a video of the recipe for this pie crust. And this pie crust was amazing. This was my first time trying this recipe, and it turned out so nice and fluffy and crispy. I was totally impressed with it. So I'm just gonna roll out this crust, and this mat that I'm using tells you exactly how big your crust is gonna be. It's really good for rolling out any kinds of doughs, rolling out cookies, and it is a non-stick silicone mat. It also has like a legend for all the measurements down below there. You can see where the gray and red circles are. Those are all conversions for measurements, so that it's easy if you have a recipe where you need to do any kind of conversions. It's super easy. So I'm just gonna grab my filling and I'm gonna fill up my first pie crust. That looks so good already, you guys. Oh my gosh. I cannot tell you how good this chicken pot pie was. I actually ended up making 2 of them and putting one in the freezer so that we could eat it on a day when like I didn't feel like cooking, or if we had a day where we had a lot going on and we didn't have time to make dinner. So we wouldn't have to eat out or anything. We could just take one of these chicken pot pies and throw it in the oven. But it's actually such a filling meal. Like, even though the pies don't seem like they're that big, they actually are so filling. The slices are so filling that it easily feeds a family of 5, and like we all ended up full and very like comfortable. So I actually needed a nap after eating this. It was like such a comfort food. It was so good. So I just rolled up my crust and laid it over top of my filling. And as you guys can see, I use my rolling pin to roll it up just because it's easier to manage that way, and it's easier to pick it up so that it doesn't break. And now I'm just pinching all the sides of my pie and connecting the bottom dough and the top dough so that we don't have any spillage. The filling doesn't fall out the sides or anything like that. And this pie I made in like a cake pan. So this one is a little bit smaller, but it turned out just as good. Yeah, I didn't have any problems with it being too small or not cooking properly. So now I'm just gonna go around the edge and I'm gonna cut off any excess pie crust and just get rid of all of that stuff that's kind of skirted around the sides of the pie, and make it look super pretty. And if you wanted to, you can save these excess pieces and make like a turnover, or make like a mini kind of dessert or something like that. I actually saved the sides of my pie crusts and I used it to make a cheesecake with. So I used it as my crust for the cheesecake. So now I'm just adding some little vent holes in the top of the pie, and this will make it so that your filling like doesn't explode, and it'll just give the pie some ventilation so that the steam can come out through the top of the pie. And they also make your pie look super pretty too. So this one's done. It's ready to go in the oven. I'm just gonna put it on a cookie sheet. But before I do that, I'm gonna go around and twist all the sides and make it look super, super pretty. And like I said, these pies were super easy to make, and you can make multiple of them at a time. They are great for putting in your freezer. So what I did with mine was I just put it in the freezer for long enough for it to get frozen, and then I took it out of the pan and wrapped it up and put it back in the freezer. And then when I was ready to cook it, I just took it out of the freezer, put it on a cookie sheet, and cooked it so that I could still have my pans to use and they weren't sitting in the freezer. You could also buy like disposable pans to, if you were making like a lot of them to freeze. You could also buy disposable pans and just use those. They have them at Dollar Tree or Dollarama. But yeah, this is a great meal if you have a big family and you are a meal planner or someone who likes to prep meals in advance. This is a great meal for that. Okay, so all I'm doing here is I'm taking 1 egg and I just cracked it in a bowl and I'm mixing it up, and I'm just going to use this to put over top of my pie crusts. It's called egg wash, and it's going to make my pie crusts nice and golden brown, and it's going to give them a little bit of shine and just make them look super pretty. So you want to get it all along the edges of that crust. Make sure you give it a nice coating. It's going to make your crust nice and crispy. Now, of course, this is optional. So if you're a person who is allergic to eggs or anything like that, you do not have to do this step. You can skip it. This also works for if you're making like a fruit pie. I like to put the egg wash and then sprinkle some coarse sugar on top of my pie, and it makes it look really nice. Or even some cinnamon. So I'm just trying to get in between all those little crevices and just get it nicely coated. Okay, so now I'm going to take my pies. I'm going to put them on a baking sheet, and I would recommend that if you are cooking pies, you cook them on top of a baking sheet just in case they explode or they have any leaks. It's going to go on the cookie sheet and not on the inside of your oven, because it can be quite a mess if a pie explodes. So I left them in the oven for about 45 minutes, and I cooked them on, I think I cooked them on 375 maybe. And as you can see, they are nice and golden brown. Do you see my daughter's face? Yeah, these pies turned out really, really good. All right, guys, so that was me making a chicken pot pie. I hope you guys enjoyed that video. If you enjoyed it, make sure you go down and hit that subscribe button. Make sure you guys tap the little bell so you don't miss any notifications of any upcoming videos, and make sure that you guys share this video if it was helpful to you or if you think it might be helpful to somebody else. Thank you all for watching. Thank you guys for coming out and supporting my channel and helping it grow, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.